Maybe on the way to your local polling precinct, as today is an election day in the state of Mississippi, runoff municipal elections. And to talk more about that, we are joined now by Secretary of State Michael Watson, who is out and about checking in to make sure that things are going well an hour into the polls being open. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, my friend, and I hope everybody is taking the time to go vote today. We've got about 28 different cities with runoffs today. And you talk about Pascagoula, Jackson, obviously all eyes are on Jackson. Meridian's got one, Holly Springs, Canton. We could travel around the state with the different ones, but hopefully folks have done their research and they're ready to get out and vote.
Everybody that is a registered voter in the areas where runoffs are happening today is eligible to vote today. Is that correct?
Well, depending on if you voted in the primary parties, primary, if you voted in the Democratic Party primary, you can go back out and vote again in the runoff. If you voted in the Republican primary and there is no runoff for you, you cannot switch over and vote in the Democratic primary. And if you did not vote at all and you want to go vote in the Democratic primary, you can, or vice versa, Republican Party, that you did not vote in the Democratic Party. So as long as you didn't vote in the opposite party that has a runoff today, then you can go vote.
Does it make sense for us to still have the Republican and Democrat primary systems, or would we be better off with open primaries?
Well, there's a big argument right now, actually, that I hear from when I travel around the state. Some folks talk about making sure that you do have an absolutely closed primary where you would have party registration. Different states do it differently. I think we've got a good system in Mississippi. I do know there are some arguments where you're getting a lot of folks that don't think they can get elected in a certain party anymore, so they switch parties and try to get their friends to come vote in their primaries, and maybe they don't hold as closely to the beliefs of that party as some would hope. So there's some discussions out there, and again, that's something that the legislature has to deal with.
You never take a position on these questions.
Well, I'm not in the legislature, so I'll leave that to my friends. And look, the Secretary of State coming into office, a lot of folks talked about, gosh, Michael's so conservative, and that is one of the offices, if any, that should be as nonpartisan as possible. And so we try to do that. We try to, call it like we see it. We're the umpire here, and balls and strikes, no matter who the batter is, we got to call them. And so I try to stay out of that and make sure that we're as fair as we can be.
Turnout, I know, is a concern, especially in a runoff. Traditionally, you have lower numbers than you do in general elections, and when you have elections that are not in November, kind of traditional voting times, you have turnout that's down a little bit. What is your office forecasting today?
Yeah, not really a forecast, Richard. And again, I think one of the hard parts here is coming straight out of Easter weekend. A lot of folks were gathering and traveling with their families, and maybe they're tired and just don't feel like getting out to vote today. And we see that sometimes in the old system before we changed the law, where they had 3-week a 3-week runoff, which always fell Thanksgiving week. And again, folks were traveling, numbers were down. And I just try to encourage people as much as possible to understand the importance of these local elections. As you and I have discussed, these are the ones that are going to impact your lives on an everyday basis. When you talk about your transportation, roads and bridges, when you talk about your policemen, your firefighters, your garbage collection, things that are going to impact you, and you're going to know about it pretty quickly if they're not done correctly. So these are big elections, and I hope folks are paying attention. And again, just coming off a holiday weekend, I hope that they are charged up and ready to go vote today.
And there may be some places where there is a different category that people are voting on today, but primarily we are talking about mayoral races and then races for Board of Supervisors and Board of Aldermen, right?
Well, so these are, yes, your municipal elections. So depending on, if you're an alderman or a city council member or mayor, those are the types that we are focused on today. And as you mentioned, sometimes there are special elections that wind up being on the same date. But those are primarily what we're concerned with this year, municipal election year in Mississippi. And, typically these are kind of slow years for us at the Secretary of State's office because, again, Mississippi is a bottom-up state, and the hard work is done at the local level. But this year has been a little bit different. We've had a lot more questions, a lot more seems like issues that we have to guide our cities through, which is fine. That's our job. We're happy to do so. It just seems like it's been a little busier this year than a typical municipal election year. And again, you talk about the big election there in Jackson. That's been getting all the attention. We've got to have a great capital city. So we've got some work to do there, and it'll be interesting to watch what the citizens of Jackson do today.
You know, one of the news stories, Michael, that comes out leading up to elections sometimes is about filing deadlines, financial reporting deadlines, all of those things that come through your office. And it seems that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, that sometimes those deadlines are missed, and yet there's not necessarily recourse for missed deadlines. Is that happening more? Are you fighting that in your office, or are people doing what they're supposed to do in terms of deadlines leading up to general or runoff elections?
I think, Richard, why you're seeing it more is we've been very active to hold people accountable. And when we see it, we call it like we see it. We don't, again, we try to be fair to both sides. R's, D's, I's, whoever you are, you miss a deadline, we're going to let you know about it. And so maybe that's the case. You may be seeing a little bit more of those articles coming out. But also, I think, in some of these contentious races, I think the media has picked up on that as well. So, they see a person that continues to not meet deadlines, and it seems like maybe they try to think that they're above the law. They get called out for it very, very often. Maybe that's the case. But as far as we're concerned, again, that plays for both sides. I don't care who you are. You miss a deadline, we're going to let you know about it. And I think that's important. Now, on the enforcement side, some of these things, and you see this a lot on election law, there's not really penalties that are built in there.
Well, and that's where I wanted to go next, right? I mean,
right.
So if there's a financial reporting deadline that's at the end of a quarter and somebody misses it, whether it's intentional or accidental, and you, as you said, we're going to let you know about it, and media is covering it, but what's the actual recourse for someone that misses a reporting deadline?
Right. And again, not just that one, but other pieces in election law, there seems to be a lack of penalties. And so I think we've talked about this. We basically have rewritten a bunch of pieces of election law and parts of the code. One of those we are now focused on is basically we're going to rewrite the entire code. And how do we study that to make sure that when you do miss a filing deadline, when you do, don't put your paid for by the committee to elect Michael Watson on your campaign signs, or whatever the violation may be, that there will be a penalty. And I think we've just kind of overlooked that for too long. And so we're really clamping down on it from our perspective. And as we see that and we see a lack of penalties, then we're going to try to rewrite those statutes and put some penalties in place where people actually have to do what the law tells them they have to do, instead of just turning the other eye there and not at least give them a slap on the wrist, some kind of small penalty. There's nothing there. And so that's what we're going to try to correct as we rewrite the code.
Last thing for you, a lot of eyes on DeSoto County today, as today was the deadline from that decision from the 3-judge panel about redrawing the district lines. I guess that went back to, was it election commissioners, but then also the governor, the lieutenant governor, your office, and the attorney general's office. What's the update there in terms of maps being resubmitted with new lines on this, which was the deadline for that submission?
Yeah, so I'll give you the procedural answer. I can't talk about it since I'm part of that equation. The State Board of Election Commissioners actually has a meeting today at 4:00, and the 3-judge panel, basically told the SBEC, again, the State Board of Election Commissioners, that you have 7 days to either propose your own map, or we're going to move forward one way or the other. So that meeting today is at 4:00. It will be the governor, the attorney general, and myself. And so we'll see what comes from that. But outside of those details, I can't really talk much about it.
But isn't that deadline today?
It is. It is.
I mean, a 4 o'clock meeting for, I'm assuming, what would be a 5 o'clock deadline strikes me as interesting timing.
Well, there's a couple of things there. For the SBEC, you have to have 24-hour notice for a general meeting. And drawing maps is a process that isn't very quick. And so you've got to run different numbers. And if you've followed the court here, what they have been looking at is not only just the numbers as far as your black voting age population, and often you'll hear BVAP, that is that term. Are those numbers high enough? And then are your performance measures high enough? So if you have a BVAP of north of 50%, well, does that perform? Does just because you have, and I'm throwing numbers out here, Richard. This is not, in the case or whatever. So if you have a BVAP of 55%, but somehow that doesn't equate to a black person or a minority winning that election, over the course of time, then their performance measures. So if they don't win it 50% or more of the time, then the performance measure is sub 50. Well, the court said that's. I don't think that's good enough.
Cut you short here. I'm sorry, Michael Watson, Secretary of State. So far beyond my pay grade, I don't have the ability to make breaks slide one way or the other, and so sometimes we run out of time. I think we're going to have the Secretary of State back here in just a second. He was going to give us a call back and finish explaining that. We were talking about the redrawing of the Senate district lines in DeSoto County, and there's a deadline today, according to the court that ruled a week ago today. The three-judge panel said that the State Board of Election Commissioners had 7 days to submit a proposal for a redraw. Secretary of State Michael Watson's back on with us. He did tell us that he can't talk specifically about what he expects to happen today, but he was explaining the process, and you were talking about BVAP. Michael, let's start right there. That acronym, BVAP, is something that people hear, but I'm not sure that everybody knows exactly what it means.
Right. So that is your black voting age population. Okay. And it has been a key here of what the court has looked at. Again, this is a Section 2 case, so if people want to do a little research on Section 2, the court has looked at a few things here, and I think this is probably the third map, I guess, that we'll look at from the perspective of the state. And what they have done is, in the first case, it basically kicked out a few of the districts. Legislature came back and redrew several of those districts. The court came back and said, all right, we'll take some of those districts, but not all of those districts. And in the meantime, the other side, so it's the state on one side, NAACP, and a couple other on the other side, they have drawn their own maps. And so just, again, procedurally, this is what the court is trying to do. Do we take the NAACP maps because we don't think the legislature did what we told them to do, or now we're going to say, hey, State Board of Election Commissioners, why don't you take a shot at drawing a map, and maybe we'll take that map. And in the grand scheme, in the high level here, again, I'm not talking specifics, just procedurally so people understand what the court is looking at here. What they kicked out the last district and basically said, look, you've got to have a minority majority district up in the DeSoto County area. And so what that means is you have to have a BVAP north of 50%. So it's a majority, makes up the majority of that district. And, oh, by the way, we also want to make sure that it performs. So you can't just say there's a minority population in this district, but perhaps they don't come out and vote on Election Day. And I think that's where the big question is if the court says, hey, 55% of a majority district, well, maybe Republicans still win that district 7 out of every 12 elections or 7 out of 13 or whatever. Well, that doesn't perform. That's not good enough. So that's kind of what the court is looking at. And again, without getting into the details of trying to not get myself in trouble on the legal side, that's trying to paint a picture of what the court's looking at.
So to me, that actually brings up an interesting legal question. And you may or may not be able to address this. That's an interesting way for the judicial system, to me, to look at it. You create districts that give both parties the opportunity to win, but it sounds like you're also saying, yes, but we're also going to hold the hand of the voters to make sure that not only they win or have the opportunity to win, but that they follow through on the opportunity. Am I understanding that right?
You are, and I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the arguments. And again, I'm not taking a position. I'm trying to explain to the voters that if you have a district with a majority of voters but they still don't come out to vote, I think that's where the question is: at what point has the court gone too far? And so I'm gonna try to back away from this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and let's leave it here. So possible outcomes from this after today, which was that 7-day deadline. The State Board of Election Commissioners could submit a map for consideration by this 3-judge panel, or the NAACP map could be adopted. Is there a third option?
No, I don't think. In their last, I guess, ruling that came recently, they basically said we're not inclined to draw our own map. We're pretty much inclined to select one of the maps that are before us.
Okay.
So again, procedurally, if they choose one of the map or the other, and the other party says, "Hey, we don't like that," then they could further appeal. So
gotcha.
I'll leave it at that.
Moving forward, what would that mean for elections based on whatever map is selected? Do we now go to November and have potential special elections? Is that the next step in terms of the voting process?
Yeah, so the goal was to put in basically a primary as well as a general. But we're running up against some pretty hard deadlines here, like you did on that time deadline to cut me off, with elections that you to get everything done, to get the ballots printed, to get folks the ability to vote, to get everything by the law. You've got a hard stop here. So if they go past that, the court could say, hey, look, we're going to change the dates here, and we're going to compress the schedule, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Or if it drags on too long, then maybe we don't have them in November. Maybe it's December, or maybe it's next year. So it's kind of a moving target, and it's really in the court's hands right now.
Gotcha. And all of this stems originally from a 2022 lawsuit that the NAACP filed against the state of Mississippi for the district map, and that's where we are today. Michael Watson, Secretary of State, I hope I made you sufficiently uncomfortable during the conversation. You need more of that in your life. Thanks for your time. Always good to visit.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
Michael Watson, Secretary of State. Yeah, he made an interesting point when he was talking earlier about statewide elected offices. You have Republicans and Democrats, conservative and liberals, that run for these offices. And when you're talking about a governor or a lieutenant governor or a state treasurer or secretary of insurance or attorney general, those are, whether they should be or not, those are obviously partisan elections. Secretary of State is a little bit different. In terms of the election itself, it is a partisan election. But the office, the actual job should be apolitical. It should be about simply doing the job of the office without regard for Republican or Democrat. And I think that's the eye of the needle that Michael Watson is trying to thread in this. I mean, if you know his background, you know that he is not only a Republican, but is a conservative Republican. And if Michael Watson chooses to run for a different office moving into the future, then he will run as such. But in this current office, you could tell that both from a legal standpoint and also from a partisan standpoint, he was trying to stick to just the facts, which certainly understand that. And hopefully, I think his answers speak to what it is. Which leads us to a question, obviously not one that the Secretary of State's going to answer. What's the outcome going to be on this? I mean, I'm just doing really basic math here. The kind that you can do on your fingers, where 2 fingers on this hand and 2 fingers on this hand equals 4 total fingers. If the State Board of Election Commissioners, led by the governor, the attorney general, and the Secretary of State, is having a meeting today at 4 o'clock on deadline day, and look, we may wake up tomorrow morning and find that this is not even remotely accurate, but it says to me that the most likely outcome here is that the court is going to adopt the NAACP map. I mean, I think that is the most likely outcome. And that's not some like absolutely awful, terrible thing, but it certainly is not what DeSoto County wanted. It's certainly not what the elected officials from DeSoto County wanted. And it's going to make for an interesting fall, especially with those timelines that we were talking about a second ago. Thomas and Greenwood sifting through the mass and getting to the point. He says, you mean like Watson running for lieutenant governor? Or any other office that he might run for in the future. Darren and Jackson. Here's my question. Say that the citizens of a minority-majority district decide to go vote in a different direction and vote for the candidate of the other party and elects him or her. Would the argument be that the district was drawn wrong? And would they again need to figure out how to keep a minority in office, or should we just appoint that person? I hear what you're saying, Darren. And look, based on population spread, I think drawing districts that are representative of the demographic population of a specific area is a very fair thing. Now, the performance measure, that's a different story. I mean, the way I described it a second ago is, okay, you've created an opportunity. Now you have to hold the hand on voting day as well. It's like the whole lead a horse to water but make him drink. You can't make him drink. If you create fair districts, then it should be incumbent on the voters in that district to go vote. And if they don't, that's a them problem.